It is the start of the regular season in Major League Baseball this week, so it's preview time here on Couch Potato Diary, and the start of the season is a good time to take a wide look at the league and just see who's the best. So, here is the top 10 list for me, for the best players in Major League Baseball. It is another season and another chance to go over who we think are the top players in all of Major League Baseball. So let's get right into it. We will start at number 10, and he's high up there on a lot of lists, but I don't know if I've seen him on a few of these. But for me, it's Yoshinobu Yamamoto from the LA Dodgers. When you can almost single-handedly come in and shut down a team in a World Series, that's some pretty high-level stuff. And it felt like that's what happened with him against the Toronto Blue Jays in the World Series. And you can obviously tell that's not something that I enjoy saying, but he was so dominant in that playoff run for the Dodgers. And then to come in and shut that game down after throwing 96, 95 pitches the night before in Game 7 was truly spectacular, and that earns him the spot on this list here at number 10. At number 9, it's Garrett Crochet. This is surprisingly, and honestly, I was thinking about this, this is about as pitcher heavy this top 10 has been in the 4 or 5 years that we've been doing this here on Couch Potato Diary. We're starting to get that point where marquee pitching matchups and aces are back, and it's a really exciting place to be. And so with that, number 9 is Garrett Crochet from the Boston Red Sox. I think you could have made a case that he could have been the Cy Young winner in the American League last season, given how Tarek Skubal kind of stumbled down the stretch for the Tigers. But another season of just pure dominance here with the Red Sox, and this guy moves into a different echelon, I think. But for now, a very, very good year, and I think well-deserving of being number 9 on this list. At number 8, it's Juan Soto. Probably has the skills to be a little bit higher up here, but this is more a statement on where everyone else is at than Soto. Still one of the, if not the most, probably not, but one of the most feared hitters in Major League Baseball. So you have to put him on here. Defense, not the fastest dude, but in terms of just being a pure all-around hitter, this guy is very scary. At number 7, it's Vlad Guerrero Jr., and maybe I'm overcompensating because I didn't want to be a homer, again, you can see, but I think when we do this list again next year, this guy is going to be significantly higher on here. I really do think that between the incredible playoff run, starting with just dismantling the New York Yankees, on through the Mariners series with that picturesque home run with the sun setting and everything like that, and then into the World Series, this guy leveled up, and then he carried that into the World Baseball Classic. If he can keep that going now through most of 162 and then another playoff run for the Blue Jays, then we're talking about one of the best players in baseball. We are already, but I think he moves up a tier if he can do that again this season. At number 6, it's Cal Raleigh, from the Seattle Mariners. MVP candidate last season, 60 home runs, doing it all. Just again, one of the more feared hitters in all of Major League Baseball. The only question is, can he do it again? At number 5, it's Bobby Witt Jr. I thought he was the best player in the WBC with what he was able to do defensively. It just felt like he took away basically an entire half of the diamond to himself. And so just defensively, he deserves to be on here. But then you factor in the speed, the batting, and everything else that he can bring to the table. And this is truly one of the best players in all of MLB. We'll get to the top half here in just a second, but just want to remind you that if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube, and hit that like button. Let me know where you guys disagree with me as we go through this list. At number 4, it is Tarek Skubal from the Detroit Tigers. It's insane to me that this guy is at least entering the season as we're recording this today in a contract year after some weird stuff with his arbitration with the Detroit Tigers. This is one of the most dominant pitchers in MLB. And yeah, it kind of went a little sideways toward the end of last season. I don't think that's going to be an issue here. He is obviously taking the season very seriously and is very deserving of being on this list. At number 3, another starter. It's Paul Skeens. Just plain and simple, the best pitcher in baseball. And if not for 2 superheroes ahead of him, could very much be on the top of this list. Just one of consistency, dominance, everything that you want from a starter. He's that. And then number 2, Aaron Judge. Defensively, it took a bit of a turn last year, but he was dealing with some elbow issues and everything like that. Made a couple nice sliding catches in the WBC. and a good throw as well. But like hitting wise, there's no one like him. Best hitter in baseball right now, and just incredibly feared until championship games. And number one, forever and always, Shohei Ohtani. Starting pitching, apparently there's some talk that he's gunning for a Cy Young, and when he gunned for 50 stolen bases a couple of years ago, he got it. So we'll see what he can do on the mound as a hitter. Just absolutely incredible. When you just factor in the hitting, he's probably one or two on this list, and then you throw in a starter that they trusted in Game 7 of the World Series, and it really shows you the entire range of capabilities that this guy has. So where did I screw up? Let me know in the comments. I can't imagine I went 10 for 10. So did I miss anyone, or is the order shifted a little bit? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this from Couch Potato Diary, but you want it with you wherever you go, well, we have that. You can search Couch Potato Diary in podcast form on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. These are three players that I think are going to turn into some breakout stars this year. And all three of these guys have already broken out per se, but the star part, I think, is something to focus on here. I think all three of these guys have an opportunity to kind of jump another level here in Major League Baseball this season. At number 3, it's Jacob Misiorowski from the Milwaukee Brewers. Everyone was already excited about him pitching in the All-Star game. The stuff is obviously electric, but I think now another full season, him being the guy with the Milwaukee Brewers who are going to be in another race for the division title, this is another opportunity for this guy to show how good he can be for this Brewers team, and I think we're going to be talking about this guy in a much different way 365 days from now. At number 2, it's Addison Barger, and for people who wear the same hat as I do, this is a guy who has already broken out. He hits the grand slam in a pinch hit situation in the World Series, but he's really only in these spots because Anthony Santander couldn't stay healthy and now isn't healthy to start the season again. But you watch him in spring, and he is hitting the heck out of the baseball. He is an exit velocity king. And he already kind of went through his growing pains of, all right, the league has kind of figured me out. What do I have to do now? He's already progressed beyond that. Not that the league is just going to throw up their hands and, well, don't know what we could possibly do with this kid now. But I think that the big adjustments that he needs to make have already been made. This is a guy who hits the ball hard. He's athletic, turning into a pretty good defender. I think there's a very real chance we're talking about Addison Barger, the All-Star this season with the Toronto Blue Jays. And number 1 is Elly De La Cruz for the Cincinnati Reds. One of the reasons we haven't talked about this guy as much is the Reds haven't been as relevant, but they're obviously making a push. They have a really good pitching staff out in Cincinnati, and this guy feels like he can be the real deal. And if he can put it all together for a team that's competitive this season, I think Elly De La Cruz finds a way into that top 10 players list for 2027, assuming a lockout doesn't get in the way. So those are three guys who I have my eye on, who have already broken out, but now can really make a push toward stardom in 2026. What do you guys think? Anyone else that's kind of on your radar? Do you think I'm overrating any of these three? Let me know in the comments. And while you are there, if you're clicking on the comment button, it's just a little move up to the subscribe button and hit that like one as well. Earlier, we went over the best players in baseball. Now, time to look at the most talented teams. Yes, that doesn't always equal championships, although in Major League Baseball, it certainly has the last couple of years. So, does anyone upend the Dodgers for the most talent on their team? I think we all probably know the answer to that, but it's fun to look at who else is on the list anyway. So, here are the most talented teams in Major League Baseball heading into the 2026 season. So, obviously, this is up for interpretation. It doesn't always mean the best team, the best fit, the best future, or anything like that. It is just which team for 2026 do I think has the most talented baseball humans on it. And so with that in mind, we will start with the Philadelphia Phillies. I know that it is a roster that is aging, absolutely. But Schwarber, Turner, Harper, a very, very good pitching staff as well. This is a pretty deep, very talented baseball group. And 1 through 9, that lineup is really, really difficult to pitch to, and that pitching staff is difficult to hit. It's a pretty good combo. So I I know there's a lot of pressure on them this season, and it is, I think, going to be a pretty easy pick for some to go against them because of the age and everything like that, but I still think this is a really, really good baseball team. At number 4, it's the Toronto Blue Jays. The Bo Bichette loss knocks them down a peg on this, but when you look at the lineup, it's just solid 1 through 9. You have the superstar in the middle with Vlad Guerrero Jr., and then the pitching staff is one of the best in baseball, with, when healthy, anyway. That's obviously not the case right now, but when healthy, Gosman, Bieber, Yasavage, bringing in Cease, Ponce, Lauer, Scherzer, and the bullpen. I know the last thing we saw from them, not overly positive, blowing the lead in Game 7, but I still think the acquisition of Rogers helps out this bullpen quite a bit. Jimmy Garcia comes back at some point. Louis Varland was a stud during the postseason, and Hoffman, when he's on, is still really, really good. We saw, again, how the season ended for him, giving up the home run. That was a problem for him last year, but there's a lot of swing and miss in his game also. So I just think there are very few holes on this Blue Jays roster, and so that's why they make the list this season. Coming in at number 3, it's the Seattle Mariners. Again, a really good group. I like the acquisition of Donovan a lot. And you saw in the American League Championship Series, it's one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. The bullpen could use a little bit more depth, but lineup-wise, it's a very difficult group to navigate, especially when Naylor's rolling, when you have Raleigh as an MVP candidate, when Julio Rodriguez is playing like an MVP candidate. This is a team that has incredible talent all over the field, and they feel like they are knocking on the door of a championship right now. At number 2, it's the New York Mets. I have said before that they were an overrated team when we did one of those other videos, and I still stand by that. But I think part of that is the talent maybe doesn't fit in all of the right places. But again, this lineup, it's tough to do any better than. When you see the acquisitions that they made, bringing in Bo Bichette, Simeon still has, I think, a little bit left in the tank anyway, with Polanco as well. Luis Robert is, I think, going to remind some people of how good he is when he steps in for this team this year. They have some young pieces to be excited about. The starting rotation, kind of the same thing. They have some young pieces to be excited about, and then acquiring Peralta at the top of it gives this a very deep look. I worry about the bullpen a little bit, but I love a lot of the acquisitions that they made to the lineup. Peralta is going to establish himself as an ace on this team, and that's why I have them as high up as they are. So, again, I don't like where it all fits, but just from a pure talent standpoint, it's a really good group. And then number 1, it's the Dodgers. Like, you have now 4 MVP candidates, you have multiple Cy Young candidates on there, and they solidified the bullpen, bringing in Diaz to lock things down in the 9th inning. There are very few weak spots on this team. It's a phenomenal farm system as well. There's a reason why they're the back-to-back World Series champions, because they have so much talent on this roster. So, what do you guys think? Did I miss on anyone? Am I too high on some of these teams? Am I too low on teams that didn't make it? Let me know in the comments, or find me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein on Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, and we can keep the conversations going over there. It's the chant that every fan loves to make, the overrated one at Major League Baseball games. So, we're going into the start of another season. Who are the most overvalued, but let's be real, who are the most overrated teams in Major League Baseball? Let's take a look at it from the Vegas win total perspective. All right, here are the 5 teams that I think are being overrated by Las Vegas and the odds makers in the lead up to the Major League Baseball season. Coming in at number 5, it's the Cleveland Guardians. Vegas has their win total right now at 78.5. And look, I keep predicting that this team is going to fall off, and they keep not falling off, but I do think that there could be a bit of a tipping point here this season. Stephen Kwan, there's a bit of a thing with his contract and an extension and everything like that. If they end up moving him, I just don't think this team hits enough. Yes, the pitching's good. Yes, everything else, and it's a fairly well put together team. But in terms of being competitive, if they weren't in the Central, I don't think it would be close. So I think this is the year that it finally catches up to the Cleveland Guardians. At number 4, it is the Houston Astros. Their total is at 85 and a half. I know Framber Valdez could be a lot. Tried to drill his catcher with a pitch. Didn't try. Successfully drilled his catcher with a pitch. But he was still quite good. And replacing him with Imai, who was solid in Japan, but is far from a known quantity in Major League Baseball, and then not adding a whole lot anywhere else. I know the Astros have been able to keep it competitive while losing a lot of this talent, but I think it's starting to catch up to them, and I think this is another year where that happens. So I think at 85 and a half, I think they're being overvalued right now. Number 3, the Baltimore Orioles. 85 and a half is their win total. And yes, off-season wise, they focused on the bats again, and this offense looks scary good. Adding Pete Alonso and Taylor Ward to an offense that already has a ton of talent on it is very good work. But this was already an all right offense. And like some of the young kids didn't step up in the way that they wanted them to. So again, we're kind of baking in some best case scenario from a lot of younger players on this offense. And then we're expecting beyond best case scenario from anyone in this pitching staff. Like Zach Eflin being the big ad. It's, oh, well then, I'm not as afraid of this pitching staff. And so, yes, they're going to outslug a lot of those issues. I just don't know if they're going to do it 86 times this season. So who are the top 2 most overrated teams in MLB for the upcoming season? Let you know in just a second. But just want to remind you that we do have a podcast with Couch Potato Diary. So search Couch Potato Diary, wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pods. Coming in at number 2, it's the Detroit Tigers. This one's a little karmic. When you have an arbitration hearing with one of the best pitchers in baseball and the entire baseball world is like, guys, what are you doing? I just feel like that costs you a little bit. I don't think they added to the lineup in the way that they needed to. There's a lot of upside with a lot of these players, but if there is any kind of a holdup with Skubal, like if it goes really sideways, they're trading him anyway. But beyond Skubal, like yes, Verlander is a fun story. Sure, Flaherty is good, but it's just not enough. And we saw this team kind of fall off toward the end of last season. I kind of wonder if that's a little bit more what they are, plus all the drama around Skubal with his arbitration and everything like that. I just feel like this is going to be a bit of an off year for the Detroit Tigers. And at number 1, it's the New York Mets at 90 and a half wins. And maybe there's a little bit of bitterness with the Blue Jay fan in me with them getting Bo Bichette for a wild overpay. Offensively, this team is going to be really, really good, obviously, right? Top of the lineup with Lindor and Soto, and Bo Bichette is good. But then after that, like Simeon was available for a reason, and like Beatty and Vientos and those guys, it hasn't really clicked in the way that a lot of people were expecting it to. And then you factor in that you have a few guys who are playing positions they've never played before. I still think this is a playoff team. I think they're going to be a good baseball team, but I think there's going to be some growing pains early on in the season. So I think this is more a wild card team than it is a dominant division winner. So 90 and a half, just a bit too overrated for me. What do you guys think? I'm sure there's about 5 fan bases here that very much disagree with me when it comes to this one. So let me know in the comments, hit the like button and subscribe, and share this with your baseball fan friends. You can either mock a Mets fan or send it to one and rage bait them a little bit. Either way, would really appreciate it if we could share this video with some of your baseball fan friends. Everyone loves an underdog story, right? Well, Major League Baseball always brings some great ones. We saw last year with the Blue Jays' run to the World Series. But there are some teams still getting undervalued, underrated, if you will, across MLB. So today we're going to look at the top 5 undervalued teams on the betting market and from the folks out in Vegas when looking at the win totals. So here are my picks for the most underrated teams in Major League Baseball this season. Again, we are using the Vegas win totals to figure out who are the most undervalued teams in MLB. Do want to remind you, if you're looking for the opposite of this, the overrated teams, that video is already up now. Or if you're listening in podcast form, it was in the podcast yesterday. Coming in at number 5 for being underrated in Major League Baseball, a team that seems perpetually overrated, the San Diego Padres. Their win total sits at 83.5. And I understand it does feel like they have kind of fallen off a little bit, but you have Tatis coming off of a fantastic WBC, same with Manny Machado, just a solid lineup 1 through 9. They didn't make that big splash in free agency that we're all accustomed to with them. It was just kind of keeping Michael King around. But having Miller in the back part of that bullpen, for a full season, I think is going to help keep them above this win total. So I like them. I think that this is an intriguing team. Plus, if they're around it at the deadline, you know they're going to be aggressive. So this is one I don't think we're going to miss this one by a little. We're either going to miss it by a ton, or this one's going to be locked up by August. Like that, this is one where I think that they're going to be way off of this one way or the other. Coming in at number 4, it is the San Francisco Giants. Their total comes in at 80.5. A full year of Rafael Devers, a full spring training of him working over at first base. And you have that pop. They signed Adames last offseason, bringing in Luis Ariz on a prove-it contract, Harrison Bader late in the offseason also. These are the types of moves that Giants fans have become a little bit frustrated with, that they kind of shop in the second tier of free agents, or maybe even a touch below that. But it strengthens the lineup. It kind of extends things a little bit. And I think it's just a decently solid group of hitters that they have on this team. And then pitching wise, they have a couple arms that you fear as well. So I'm not making a case that this is going to be a team that pushes for a playoff spot. Although I guess if I'm saying over 80.5 wins, they'll at least be in the conversation for one of those last wild card spots. But I think this is at least the team that's going to be over 500. I said before with the Padres one that one we're going to know. We're going to miss that one or nail that one by a lot. This isn't one of those. This one is going to come down to the last 2 or 3 games of the regular season, I think. But I still think that they are being underrated right now in Major League Baseball. Coming in at number 3 is the Texas Rangers. They got a sneaky healthy year from DeGrom last season. They bring in Mackenzie Gore to help out with that pitching staff. Simeon Fernimo, I think, is actually a bit of an upgrade for them. I kind of like that for them. I think you have another year of progress for some of the younger players that intrigue you on this team also. So I think there's a lot to like with this Rangers squad. And we talked yesterday about how I think the Astros are a touch overrated. So I think Texas is going to be able to get some wins off of those guys as well. I think this is going to be a competitive baseball team this year. And so I have the Rangers coming in at 83.5 wins as an underrated team in MLB this year. Before we get to the last two, a reminder that if you're watching this and you're already at this point, hit that subscribe button. Also, while you're here, hit the like. It's right there. And you can share your thoughts on this one in the comments. But hitting subscribe really does help the channel out as we look to grow this thing here in 2026. Coming in at number 2, the Atlanta Braves at 87.5 wins. This was a team that had the year from hell last year with injury issues and everything like that. They are healthy, and when healthy, it's one of the most talented teams in the league, 1 through 9. A solid pitching staff, a pretty good bullpen that they've added to fairly effectively, I think. So I like this group a lot. I think Alex Anthopoulos still has a lot of moves to make as general manager of this team as well. So there's a lot to like about this Braves team. 87.5. It's a competitive National League East this season, but I think the Braves are going to be right back at the top of it with a group that's only issue has been staying healthy the last couple of seasons. And at number 1, it's the Chicago Cubs. Yes, they lost Kyle Tucker, but bringing in Bregman, helping out with that, helping out with the atmosphere in the clubhouse and everything there. And then adding Cabrera to the rotation, adding Maton with others in the bullpen. I think that they didn't get that one name that helps out with Tucker, but and with Bregman, I wasn't huge when the Blue Jays were in on him. That's more length of contract than anything. I think for this year, he's going to be solid. He's going to help out with that room. And I think we've seen some progress from some of their other players that makes you think this could be a very interesting year. I think this is a really good pitching staff and a solid offense. And so at 88.5, I really like the Cubs and the over on that this season. And that is why I think they are the most underrated team in Major League Baseball for 2026. What did you guys think? Am I way overestimating some of these teams, or did I miss someone? Let me know in the comments, or again, if you're listening, hit me up on social media. I am at Primetime Klein everywhere. And yes, if you're watching this and you're like listening, of course I had to be. We also do a podcast here with Couch Potato Diary. Just search Couch Potato Diary on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. We've already covered the teams. What about the players? Let's take a look at what players are being overrated in MLB going into a Right, just did the underrated players in MLB. So going to do the same format. Only three we have here for overrated. But going to use fantasy baseball ADP as kind of our barometer here. So at number 3, it is Arizona Diamondbacks Geraldo Perdomo coming in with an ADP of 62. I don't see it with him. I think he's solid, but again, I think there's there are pieces around him that are fine, but he's going 18 picks ahead of Bo Bichette right now. So I don't get it with him. I'm sure there are arguments you could make, but just in general, like he is a solid baseball player, but in terms of being top 60 or anything like that, even with fantasy baseball and the differences with fantasy and regular, but I'm not there with Perdomo. I think he is quite overrated coming into this season. Coming in at number 2, it's Zach Neto from the LA Angels, 33rd in ADP. An exciting player, and I think he's going to be fine. I just don't know if you're going to see an improvement with him enough that some of those counting numbers and everything are going to hit for someone to be drafting him in the 3rd round or anything like that for fantasy baseball. And then for regular baseball, like the Angels just aren't that great. Again, he's going to be a solid player, and I think he's going to be fun to watch at times and give the Angels a bit of hope where they haven't had that in a while. But in terms of him being that top 30 guy or anything like that, I just don't see it there. And at number 1, maybe there is a little bit of bitterness happening here, but it's Kyle Tucker. Right now, ADP of 11. It was a down year for him last season, and I'm sure there will be some bounce back with him. But I think one of the things we are going to see is that, yes, he was the best player available in free agency. That doesn't make him one of the best players in baseball. I think that having the pressure off of him is going to be just fine, but now that the Blue Jays aren't pursuing him, and you can kind of look at it, I think taking a step back, I think there are quite a few red flags with this guy and how he chose to go about things in free agency. And I think some of that could show up out on the diamond this year. So Kyle Tucker, I think in fantasy and probably in reality, the most overrated player in MLB for the 2026 season. I am sure there are going to be some disagreements. So who was left off the list and who shouldn't be on here to begin with? Let me know in the comments. And while you're there, like the video, hit subscribe, but also share this with some of your baseball fan friends, really trying to grow the channel. And whether you want to spark debate, brag to a friend like, hey, see, this guy says your dude's overrated, so nah. Or if you just want to rage bait someone, either way, share it with your baseball fan friends, and we can keep that conversation going down in the comments. Everything in Major League Baseball is studied intensely, and very few things are able to slip past people. But that doesn't mean there aren't still some misses. So today, I'm going to look at who I think are the most underrated players in fantasy baseball, and maybe just the baseball season in general for 2000. The underrated players for MLB for the 2026 season. If you're looking for underrated teams, did that video already. And if you're listening in podcast form, it probably played just before this. So you're probably not looking for that. Yes, using fantasy baseball ADP to kind of as the gauge for this. But just that was just to put a number on some of these. At number 5, it's Dylan Cease. Obviously, if you're watching, you can see the hat. I have an emotional investment in this dude being awesome this year, so I think he's going to be pretty good. But I think that there's a lot of value. Right now, his ADP in fantasy baseball is 67th overall. So we're looking at 5th, 6th round, somewhere in there. He has been a lock to rack up the counting stats, right? He has a ton of volume, strikes out a bunch of dudes, and now he's going to a Blue Jays team where the defense has improved, is improved significantly from the one that he played with in the Padres, and they have been able to get the most out of guys like this. Remember Robbie Ray's Cy Young season. Kevin Gausman has had a phenomenal stretch with the Blue Jays, and Pete Walker as their pitching coach. So I think Dylan Cease could be the next one in a long line of pitchers that kind of outperforms what they've done in the past. And so I think even in the 6th round, a pretty good steal there, getting Dylan Cease. One pick after him is the next one. Number 4, it's Shea Langeliers from the Athletics of Town to be determined. Coming in with an ADP of 68. He had a bit of a breakout year last year. Even if some of those power numbers do come down a little bit, I still think this guy has an opportunity to be a great value for people at the catcher spot where there isn't a ton of it this year. So I think that he is being slept on a little bit and underrated. And I think just around baseball, he's a bit of an underrated player as Kurtz gets a lot of the attention for the Athletics. I think Langeliers deserves quite a bit of that as well. Hitting the midway point of this at number 3 is Roman Anthony, ADP of 49. I think he is on the cusp of a major year. This is going to be your last chance, I think, to get him in the back part of the top 50. I think that you see what he was doing at the WBC. You see the talent that he has, and another year of comfort in Major League Baseball. I think this is going to be a monster season for this guy, and getting him at 49 is a phenomenal value and shows that I think he is a bit underrated right now. At number 2, a bit of a forgotten guy. It's Yordan Alvarez, ADP of 31. I said this in the underrated teams about the Padres. This one's going to miss by a lot. It's either he's going to get hurt and he's not going to be anywhere close to ADP 31, or he's going to be healthy all season and he's going to be back to being a top 10 player. He has phenomenal power, but he's not just run into a bunch of home runs and can't do anything else guy. This is just a very solid hitter for this Astros team. Maybe some RBI numbers aren't going to be there, but in terms of just being able to produce, this dude has it. And there's no way he's going to be 31st overall. He's either going to be 10th or 131st. And I'm obviously, where I'm banking on with this. Lastly, number 1, the most underrated player, I think, in fantasy baseball, and maybe even in baseball in general, is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Again, some scars from World Series with the Blue Jays, but this is a phenomenal pitcher. To get him a full round after guys like Crochet, Skubal and Skeens and all of them, that doesn't feel right to me. He feels like he is in that tier, given what he did at the World Series, the help he's going to have behind him with the Dodgers. Sometimes defense isn't exactly a premium for that club, but there's going to be so much potential with this guy. And not that he was lacking in confidence, but to see what he did in the postseason and building up to that way, I think that this is one of the premier pitchers in baseball. And for him to be 25th ADP wise, and like I said, when we did the top 10 the other day, and he was on it for me, I've seen him left off of that, and I think that's a bit of a crime. I think this is genuinely one of the best pitchers in MLB, and thus I feel like he is the most underrated player going into this MLB season. Did I miss anyone? Obviously, if they were so underrated that they didn't even make the underrated list, then obviously I'm wildly underrating someone in your mind. Let me know in the comments, and we can keep the conversation going over there. As always, we're presented by Sea of Dead. Head over to seaofdead403.ca for some great Calgary swag. Even if you're not from Calgary, there's some really great stuff in there. You can kind of see it in the background, the Stampede Wrestling shirt that we got. A lot of great stuff with Sea of Dead. So check it out, seaofdead403.ca, and get geared up for the start of another baseball season. It is the start of the baseball season, and with that brings hope, optimism. But for a lot of teams, it also brings a lot of pressure. Here are the teams that I think are facing the most pressure for the 2026 MLB season. So yes, spring training is full of optimism and passion and all of that, but now that the season is just around the corner, I got 4 teams who are facing a ton of pressure heading into the next 162 games. At number 4, it's the San Diego Padres. Bit of an off year last year. They are perpetually aggressive when it comes to making trades and player acquisitions, but at some point you think it might catch up with them a little bit. The problem is they've made all these big moves, made all these big splashes, and the Blue Jays now have more World Series appearances in the last, since 1998? 6? 8? Either way, been a while. And the Blue Jays have more World Series appearances than they do now because it just hasn't clicked for them. So you're in the same division as Goliath. I understand that. But it does kind of feel like time is running out for the Padres to really take that next step here in the National League West. At number 3, it's the New York Mets. Yes, they are very aggressive in spending, and they have an owner who is very passionate about spending, but they also have an owner who's passionate about winning, and this team hasn't done enough of it. It was a terrible collapse last season, and now they've gone out and made a number of big moves to try to improve this ball club. If this doesn't work, the fans are just going to get more and more upset out in Queens. And number 2, the Philadelphia Phillies. This is another one where it just feels like time's running out. This is a core that everyone loves. They just mash the ball. Trey Turner sliding really funky and is very fast and all of that. It's a team that, unless you're in the division, it's very easy to get behind them. But we haven't really had the chance to get behind them in championship level games. And again, they've just run into a juggernaut that is the LA Dodgers time and time again. But time's running out for this group to really make that big push, that big championship run. And I don't know how many more cracks at it they're going to get coming up after this season. But at number 1, kind of perpetually, it's the New York Yankees. They have now gone a longer stretch of not winning a championship than they have in a very, very, very long time, if ever, with this franchise. And yes, it is really hard to judge a team just championship or bust, but that is the standard that the Yankees have set for all of our entire lifetimes. And for too often, it has been bust. And I know that there's a lot of fans out in New York who are frustrated that Brian Cashman just has a job forever, and Aaron Boone has a job forever, despite being the only Yankee manager to go this long without getting a World Series championship. This is not a patient fan base. And it's an offseason where they just brought everyone back. The pitchforks are getting ready out in the Bronx. This is going to be a good team, but they needed to be a championship team to bring some peace to the evil empire. So, who else? Did I miss anyone? We only did 4. Is there anyone else you think is under a lot of pressure? Or am I overstating how much these teams need it? Let me know in the comments. And make sure you hit that subscribe button and give it a like as well. If you're still watching, you obviously like it. So hit that like button, and just really helps the channel out as we continue to try to grow here on Couch Potato Diary. The baseball season is here, and all the optimism of spring quickly makes way to a lot of pressure. And for 3 coaches in Major League Baseball, that also means that the nice comfy chair they were sitting on out in Arizona or in Florida for spring training now becomes pretty hot. Here are 3 coaches who I think are on the hot seat entering the 2026 MLB season. Whose job's on the line going into this season? I got 3 coaches who feel like they are coaching for, or managers, I guess, who feel like they are managing for their jobs in the 2026 season. At number 3, Rob Thompson for the Philadelphia Phillies. It is an aging group. It is a desperate fan base that has had a very good run, but is trying to get over that last hump. It's a much more competitive National League East this season, I think, with Atlanta being healthier and the Mets spending the way they are. There's a lot of pressure on Thompson to try to get this thing over the finish line. So I think that seat that he's sitting on is real hot right now. Up next is Carlos Mendoza. When your owner has rules named after him to try to limit spending, there's pressure on you to win. And then when they go out and spend a ton of money for what could be a 1-year contract on Bo Bichette and make the move for Luis Robert and make all of these different acquisitions, Peralta as well, there's an expectation that you're going to do well. And so with that, I think there's a ton of pressure on Mendoza. You factor in also that they completely collapsed a season ago. I think it's an incredibly hot seat that he is currently sitting on out there in Queens. And we don't have to go far for number one. I think it's Aaron Boone. There is so much frustration around that Yankee fan base that Boone is even still there. So he needs this to be a very good season out in New York. There is always pressure for them to win a championship, and they got back there a couple of years ago, but then they kind of got dummied by the Blue Jays, and they haven't won since 2009. Those types of numbers, inexcusable for the Pinstripes and for their fans. So I think Aaron Boone certainly sitting on the hot seat for the 2025 season. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Is there anyone I should have added to this list, or am I being too hard on any of these guys? Hit me up in the comments, and we can keep the conversation going there. And hey, while you're there, hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, and let's help grow this channel, shall we? We talk a lot about coaches who are on the hot seat, but what about the players? There are 5 guys who I think there's a lot of pressure on coming into the 2026 season. So let's see which players are on the hot seat going into a new baseball year. So, who is under the most pressure going into 2026? Maybe not the most pressure, because I think that's probably just Aaron Judge and just the entirety of the Yankees. I guess some guys on the Mets too. But these guys who I think, whether it is losing their job or losing a spot in baseball or just something, but I think these are 5 guys who are on the hot seat for the 2026 season. Let's begin out in San Francisco. Luis Arraez signs a 1-year, $12 million deal with the Giants, despite being a guy who is perpetually leading the league in batting average and never strikes out. It's a lot of things that teams 15 years ago would be clamoring for, but instead you are seeing someone who really sells out to just never strike out, and puts the ball in play even in non-advantageous situations. And there's a reputation building. He's also not the fastest dude, and he's certainly not the best fielder. So there's a lot of pressure on him and a lot of talk around him that he is just kind of doing it for himself and not the most effective guy when you're talking about impacting winning. I think there's a role for him in Major League Baseball, but he needs to prove it this year on a Giants team that does need a little bit of help on the offensive side. This feels like it's insane for a guy who's always hitting 300, but this does kind of feel like the last dance for Luis Arraez if he wants to stay around and play for competitive Major League Baseball teams. At number 4, we're doubling up in this one, but Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos with the Mets. A couple of very interesting young players, but they're both 26 years old now, and they kind of took a bit of a step back last year. And look, again, they're new to Major League Baseball, but there's a lot of optimism, a lot of hope around these guys to step in and be productive. And now you don't really have a whole lot of wiggle room because of how badly last season ended and because of how much this team spent to get into that conversation in 2026. If neither of these guys or either of these guys don't start producing in the way that a lot of people thought they could, then I do wonder if they become the big part of a trade package to try to go out and get another big name into New York. So I think there's a lot of pressure on these guys this season, and maybe it's unfair because if the season goes sideways, it'll probably be because they didn't do enough with the pitching staff or the bullpen. But when you have a lineup that features Lindor, Soto, Bichette, Polanco as well, you're expected to carry your weight a little bit. And these guys are going to be expected to kind of keep that line moving. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them this year. And if it doesn't happen, like I said, I think both guys could be packaged up in a move for another superstar with the Mets. Speaking of trades involving the Mets, Brandon Nimmo up next from the Texas Rangers. He gets dealt by the Mets and then thrown under the bus for some locker room disturbances that were going on last season with New York. And one of the reasons why there was that collapse from a team that a lot of people had pegged as one of the top ones in the National League East. And so this is a big make-right year for him. It's a Ranger squad that has some exciting young players and a superstar in Seager at the top of that lineup. If Nimmo can't get back to bordering on all-star levels, or if there are more issues with him in the clubhouse or anything like that, I don't know how many other teams are going to be taking a chance on this dude. So this feels like a really important reputation season for Brandon Nimmo. Before we get into our top 2, do want to remind you guys that we're trying to grow this thing here with Couch Potato Diary. So hit that subscribe button. leave a like and let me know in the comments if you agree with any of these ones or if there's someone who I'm missing that could be on the move if this season doesn't necessarily go all that well. Coming in at number 2, it's Trent Grisham with the Yankees. I don't know of many Yankee fans who are super stoked that Grisham accepted that qualifying offer from the Bombers last season. They did still get Cody Bellinger and are running it back, but I do think that if this year gets off to a bit of a shaky start, then Bellinger moves into center, Dominguez is back out and left, that they have some prospects coming in as well, and I think Grisham becomes kind of the odd man out, and because it's the Yankees and there's that bigger spotlight, I wonder how much of a reputation hit that does bring. So it feels, again, a little unfair for a guy who did step up at times a season ago, but does certainly have a ceiling with the Yankees. It does feel a little unfair to say, oh, and by the way, if you don't produce this year, you're gone. But there's a difference between exceeding expectations at $5 million and meeting them at 22. So we'll see what he can do now this season and what happens there. And at number 1, this one feels just bat crap insane, but it's Adley Rutschman from the Baltimore Orioles. We were already getting some rumblings last season and last offseason that the Orioles might be looking to move their once prized catcher and try to get things going, because it hasn't come out of the blocks the way that a lot of people thought it would, and there has been a bit of a fall off. And you can see, you can see where Baltimore's a little bit worried that a top catching prospect who looks good at one point and then maybe falls off a bit with Matt Wieters. Now I think Wieters maybe had a bit of a better career than some people thought, but it certainly wasn't some of the levels that others kind of projected for him when he was a prospect. A ton of pressure again on Baltimore this season, and they got a studded lineup. If they're competitive, Rutschman isn't really getting it done. Do you convince another team that, hey, no, it's just the pressure or whatever? Give us your top pitcher, we'll give you Adley Rutschman, and you can build around this guy now. I wonder if that kind of happens. So I think there's some pressure on Rutschman, and if it doesn't happen for him this season, I do wonder if there's a move that's happening, because we already got some of those rumors from last year. So those are the 5 players that I think are on the hot seat entering this season. Was I unfair to any of them, and did I miss anybody? Let me know in the comments, and we can keep the conversation going there, or hit me up on social media. I am at Primetime Klein on Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky. We can have the chat over there if you just want to go direct to the source. The baseball season is here, and so we've done all the previewing. We've broken everything down. It's time to now figure out how each team is going to do. We're going to start in the American League, looking at the over-under predictions for every team in the AL, and we will kick things off in the American MLB, the American League East, and this year is no exception, as you have 4 very good teams residing in this division. So we'll start with the one that isn't, the Tampa Bay Rays. Their total is at 78.5. I just have to go under on this. You look at everything going on in this division, with Baltimore getting better, with Boston, I would say, getting better. Yankees at least staying steady, but that's with 94 wins from a season ago. And the Blue Jays pitching staff getting better, offense, you can certainly make that debate. But this is a tough spot for Tampa Bay to be in. And the thing that is going to keep their heads above water here is the pitching. They are going to need everyone on that rotation, or everyone in that rotation, to pitch to their baseball reference page, basically, to have a hope. And then they're going to need more than just one breakout from this team offensively. So I don't see them finding a way to be competitive here in the AL East, and that is why I am going under with the 78.5 for the Tampa Bay Rays. The Baltimore Orioles are up next. They are at 85.5, and I'm going a tick under on this one. Again, I think if they played in the Central, they probably win that division by 30 games. If they play in the West, I think it would be pretty competitive as well. But I think when you look at how this division is set up, yes, this might be the best lineup in the division, 1 through 9, but the pitching staff just doesn't match up with Boston, with New York, certainly not with the Toronto Blue Jays. And all of those teams, while they don't have Rutschman, Henderson, Ward, Alonso, we'll see what happens with Holiday and all of those guys. Like, this is a very deep lineup, that they have the best lineup of all of those. But Boston can still slug. The Yankees have to slug to stay competitive. The Blue Jays were a gold standard for offense in 2025. All of those offenses can at least hold their own with Baltimore's, but I don't think the Orioles staff comes close to being able to hold its own with the Red Sox, Yankees, and Blue Jays. So I think the Orioles, a good team, an improved team, they are going to be a problem for teams this year in the East. I just don't think they're going to be able to surpass Boston or New York or Toronto. So I do have them going slightly under at 85.5. In the middle of division, it's the Boston Red Sox. Their total is at 87.5. And again, I am going under on this one. It's the division they're in. They didn't make that big splash that a lot of people were hoping that they would. They did well in the offseason. Like, don't get me wrong. This was an offseason where they did make quite a few additions and just brought in some solid pieces here. Losing Bregman, I think hurts, but I think it's something that they were anticipating. It didn't feel like they were really in the running for him at all. But then they weren't in on Bichette, obviously. That they didn't get Tucker. They didn't make that one big move to really kind of solidify things, but it's still a really solid team. Again, I just don't think they're as good as the Yankees, and I don't think they're as good as the Blue Jays right now. It's the story that, look, I grew up a Blue Jays fan, and you can see, especially this week, with the camera so close and all the lighting, there's some grays in here, all right? So I'm a long-weathered American League East fan. It is kind of the spot that the Blue Jays were in for a long time there, where this was a good team, and good enough to win the Central, certainly, maybe the West as well, but it's just not good enough in this division right now. So Boston, really good ball team. Don't get me wrong, but I do have them going just a touch under at 87.5. The Yankees are up next. Their total came in at 90.5. I do have to go over on this one, and it pains me a touch to say complimentary things about the Yankees. This is still a very good baseball team, right? Like, I know that there's been a lot of dunking on them for running it back and everything there, but you do have to remember that they are running it back from the team that they brought in at the trade deadline. It's not like this was the same group that went 162 with the Yankees a season ago. And that's where I think there should be some optimism here for New York, because defensively it was a punchline for them, and they ran into a team that was almost exactly opposite from them, and it did show a lot of warts that they had. But defensively, this team got better when they brought in McMahon and Caballero and those guys. So defensively, I think they will be improved this season. And I think that, like McMahon and all of those guys, it's a little whatever on the offensive side, but it's an offense that can hit the hell out of a baseball. The big thing for me is how good Bednar looked in the WBC. He's going to be at the back end of that bullpen really trying to shut things down. They have been, and they've shown that they'll be very aggressive in trying to address that bullpen. I do think there are going to be some issues getting to Bednar in the ninth inning for New York, but I think that him looking as dominant as he did for some stretches there in the WBC, I think that's going to carry over into the season. The big thing for me is this pitching staff, and there's a lot of optimism coming out of New York around this rotation with Garrett Cole coming back from Tommy John, Carlos Rodon. A lot of people really excited about how healthy he is looking. If we talked about him in terms of guys who can decide the season, if Schlittler can take the step forward that you think he probably would, and Fried kind of stays the same, like if everyone, again, pitches to their baseball reference page, this is a dominant rotation in MLB. But Cole's coming back from Tommy John. Rodon is inconsistent and gets banged up. Fried has not been immune to injury issues either. And Schlittler is now had a full season of tape on him also. So how is he going to be able to respond to that? So there's a wide variance, and I think a lot of that comes from the starting rotation, which is why I do have them second right now in MLB, or in the American League East. And number one, obviously there's some homerism here, but I do have the Blue Jays. Gone is Bo Bichette, but this team has added a tremendous amount of starting rotation depth. You look at who the Blue Jays are missing from the rotation on opening day. Francis is going to be gone for the season. Bieber dealing with some arm issues stemming from the postseason. Same thing with Trey Savage, and Jose Barrios felt like he was fine, but apparently has a fracture in his arm. So that is a very solid that four is better than any four Baltimore is going to put out there this season in terms of starting rotation. And yet the Blue Jays still put out a 5-man unit to start that you feel comfortable with. So there are going to be challenges, obviously, but this team is positioned really well to just be able to have, and this sounds silly, but go back and watch any other team. It's not always the case. The Blue Jays are positioned to have major league caliber starting pitching, regardless of injury, for this upcoming season. That this is, at its healthiest, it's one of the best staffs in baseball. And even now, when it's not at its healthiest, it's still very, very strong. The lineup, yes, they lose something in Bichette, but I really do think that there's a breakout coming for Addison Barger. We talked about that earlier in the breakdowns. You have Dalton Varsho, who hit 450 this spring, and if he would have stayed healthy, he was hitting at a 45 home run pace last year. He just couldn't stay healthy, but he had a very good postseason. You do have to assume there's some regression coming for Springer, maybe a little bit from Ernie Clement. Again, I don't think he's going to set the record for most hits in the playoffs again, but Okamoto, I'm really excited to see what he can do, and I think there is a leveling up from Barger, a leveling up from Dalton Varsho, and Vlad Guerrero Jr. seems like he has found his ultimate form now from the playoffs and now the WBC. So I still think this lineup is going to be one that is very frustrating to pitch against with the big bat and maybe big bats in the middle. The bullpen's a question, obviously. When you blow a lead in Game 7 of the World Series, I think it's fair to question it. Rogers and Varland as a couple of guys who can just eat up a ton of innings back there and be effective. We'll see what Jimmy Garcia can come back and be. I think that they have something in Fluharty, the lefty out of the pen also. So it's a question mark, absolutely. But when Hoffman is on, he is great. And I think one of the issues he had last season was they had to work him like a dog early in the year. And we saw every win mattered for Toronto. So it worked. But I don't know if he ever found his early season form again, and that they had to really manage him the rest of the way. With Varland, a full season with him now, with Rogers, a full season with him now, you're presuming, and some other guys who got some experience from last season, Fishers, Fluharty's, and the like there. I think that he will be relied on less in every leverage situation for this club this season. So I'm going over 87.5 for the Blue Jays, and I have them winning the American League East. Let's go into the Central Division now. Up first, the Chicago White Sox, under 66.5 wins. I don't see a whole lot happening here. I understand they got Murakami, and that's fantastic for them, but not that Luis Robert was any big shakes or anything like that for this team the last couple of seasons, but there's not a whole lot of talent on this club. And when you're looking at the rest of this division, it's not the strongest, but I still don't see them really making much progress this season. Up next, the Minnesota Twins. I have them under 72.5. I think that this is now a big transition year for them. They were borderline sellers at the deadline. This team did not get better in the offseason, and now I think this will be the time Ryan gets moved out. I think Buxton probably gets moved, and I think it's the start of a full-blown teardown rebuild, whatever you want to call it, out in Minnesota, and with that, a lot of losses coming, so I have them under 72.5. This one, up next, pretty predictable if you've been watching the rest of the previews. I have Cleveland going under 78.5. The pitching staff is great, and they have been able to mix and match all along. But now with the Stephen Kwan contract situation and him not having an extension and that being a little tenuous, not that he's going to just tank it or anything like that, but I do wonder if he gets moved at some point, and the offense that has just been able to squeak by with Kwan and Ramirez and then a Hope, it's asking a lot of Jose Ramirez. So yes, I have been wrong in predicting the downfall of the Guardians before, but I think this is the time where it actually happens. So I have them under 78.5. Up next, second in the division, I have the Tigers under 85.5. And I said this before, I think a little bit of it might just be a little karmic from the weird situation with Tarek Skubal and how that all went down in arbitration. I think they got best case scenario out of a lot of dudes in that lineup a season ago, and now banking on Valdez just fitting in fine, Flaherty being very effective, and you'll see what you get out of Verlander. I just think it's too many if for this team. So I have them going under at 85 and a half. And I wonder, I think it's going to get to a point where there's real conversations about what they do with Tarek Skubal around the trade deadline. And so winning the division this year, I have the Kansas City Royals. They were able to pull it off a couple of seasons ago. Bobby Witt Jr. showed at the WBC that he is an absolute superstar. I think they have enough hitting, and I think the pitching can take a step forward after a bit of a rough one a season ago. So I like what Kansas City is building out there right now around Bobby Witt Jr. I think he is enough to get that team over and across the finish line as your Central Division champions, which leaves now the American League West. But before we get to that, again, want to remind you guys, if you could hit that subscribe button, it really does help grow this channel. Hit the like as well, and let me know. I can't imagine I'm going to go just straight 15 for 15 in the division with all of you agreeing with me. So let me know what you guys are thinking as we go through the American League, and we can keep the conversation going down in the comments. Up next, the AL West. It is the LA Angels at 70 and a half wins. The perpetually disappointing LA Angels will once again be disappointing. Trading away Taylor Ward, bringing in a little bit of pitching help, I think is certainly needed. And like Trout was actually healthy last season and didn't really do a whole lot. Neto is a fun player. Soler, we know what he is at this point. I just don't think there's enough there, pitching wise or hitting wise, for this team to be overly competitive in a division that does feel like it's getting better. Up next, second last in the division, I have the Houston Astros. I think this is going to be a fall-off season for them. They have been able to somehow keep their heads above water with loss after loss after loss. They bring in Amai, who a lot of people are excited about out of Japan, but asking him to fill in for Framber Valdez, who vibes were bad, and I just criticized Detroit for signing him and said he could be a down for them. So now it's weird to also be criticizing Houston for not having him, but they just, I think, have taken too many hits throughout the seasons to be able to keep up at the pace that they have. And I do wonder if they get to a point where they kind of recognize that as the season goes on and make a couple of build up for next year sort of moves out there. So I'm going under with them at 85 and a half, which means the team without a hometown is third in the AL West. It is the Athletics. Severino was great in the WBC. That part of their game is starting to come along, but you look at some of the exciting players they have offensively. Kurtz is already in the discussion as the top first baseman in the American League or in all of baseball. Langoliers had a big bounce back season for them a year ago. So this is a team that's going to keep that progression going and be hovering right around 500, I think, this season. The Texas Rangers, I have them over 83 and a half wins. Sorry. I think I've said points a few times in this too. Apologies for that. But I have them over 83 and a half wins this season. I think the offense is going to be fine. I think people are really sleeping on this pitching staff. With DeGrom being relatively healthy-ish a season ago, Mackenzie Gore coming in, I think really solidifies what they're doing in that pitching rotation out in Texas, and I think that's going to be enough in this division to kind of carry them forward. I actually don't want to give too much away, but I have them making the playoffs right now. I just think they're going to be that good this year. I think the offense, like no Simeon, bringing in Nimmo, I feel like Nimmo getting away from everything in New York, I think there's going to be a little bit of motivation because he's been thrown under the bus a lot for reasons why things didn't go well with the Mets. So I think there's going to be a little bit of motivation from him, and I think there's going to be some progress from some of those exciting young hitters that have been coming up the last couple of seasons. So I think the Rangers get the job done and get over 83 and a half, and that leaves the Seattle Mariners. I have them over 89 and a half. I love this lineup. The addition of Donovan is a really, really smart move from them. It's still a little top heavy, but that top goes like 6 deep with this team. Losing Polanco was a bit of a surprise, but I think pivoting with Donovan is great. Raleigh, you can probably take under 62 home runs for the season, but he is still going to be a real factor. Julio Rodriguez, it feels like there's still another level that he could get to, and a full season of Naylor helping out as well. I like this group a lot offensively. And then the pitching staff is, again, one of the best in baseball. They do, I think, still need to add a little bit more depth in the bullpen. We saw that in the American League Championship Series, where they basically fell one relief pitcher short against Toronto, but that's in Game 7 of the ALCS. So just a little bit extra help there, I think is going to go a long way for this team. But there's a reason why most power rankings have them as at least the highest ranked team in the American League, and I certainly have them winning the American League West. So those are the over-under predictions for every team in the American League. Like I said, I can't imagine we agree on every single one of them. So let me know in the comments what you are thinking about this, how you think I did, and where you disagree. Let me know. And just hit the like button. You've been here the whole time. If you're hate watching at this point, I think you just give me a thumbs up just for the effort. But also hit that subscribe button. It would really, really go a long way in helping move this channel along. We continue our MLB preview now, looking at the National League. Let's go team by team, breaking down how I think each team is going to do in the 2026 season, starting with what should be a really competitive National by the Dodgers for the last few seasons, but I think some very worthy adversaries are going to come out of this for the upcoming season. And I think some of that could come from the National League East. So let's break it down. Where it won't be coming from is the Washington Nationals, as they are now in rebuild 2.0 following the trade of Mackenzie Gore. They did really well in the Juan Soto trade, and then got nothing else aside from that. They haven't really hit on a whole lot, and now moving the big part of that Soto trade out is a real blow for this team. I don't see much reason for optimism for the Nationals in 2026. Up next, the Miami Marlins, kind of ditto. At 72.5, I have them going under. And just one thing, with the whole National League, I have more overs here than I would like, and I'm sure that the numbers don't all add up. But I think the bad is going to be really bad in the NL this season. And I think the Marlins making the move, sending Cabrera off to the Cubs, I think this is now finally the year that Sandy Alcantara gets moved from Miami, and I just don't like what's coming up behind all of those guys. So I think they've waited too long to sell on what was a good pitching staff. And if you're going to wait on that, that's fine. But they didn't add nearly enough around them to make this team competitive. So it's a tough spot for the Marlins, I feel, for Miami fans. But it's going to be under at 72.5, and I think it's going to be a long year out in Miami. Up next, the New York Mets. If you've been watching the previews at all, you will know that I am under on this one at 90.5. Now, I also said this is one of the most talented teams in baseball. I think that this is still going to be a playoff team, or at least one that's going to be competing for a playoff spot, but I just think that the growing pains with Bichette at third base, with the rotation over at first, with some of the young kids working their way in, I just think it's going to be a bit of a slower start this season. Basically the opposite of what happened in Queens last year, where it's going to be a not bad, but a slower start to the season, and then they get stronger and better as the year goes on. This lineup is going to be dangerous, and they're going to slug their way to a number of victories this year. Peralta at the top of this rotation, and that's an ace. That's a big one. There are some pretty big question marks behind it, though, with some of the young players that came in and pitched well a season ago, but can you rely on that now for this season? It's too inconsistent, but now it's an ace and then inconsistent. And I don't love the moves they made with the bullpen. I didn't look at the Yankees last year and think, oh, we need to replicate that bullpen. But maybe getting out of the Bronx will help Williams kind of reach that level that he had with the Milwaukee Brewers. But I think that's a bit of a downgrade there as well. So they made a lot of moves, and it's exciting for the Mets, but 90 wins, I don't see it. The Philadelphia Phillies, their total was at 89.5. I'm going over on the Phillies. I still think, I get disappointing into last season. You have your GM coming out and saying that your star player isn't a star player anymore, and then he looks like a star player in the WBC. This is still a team that is very, very good, and a lineup that is feared and dangerous, and a starting staff that, not the deepest anymore, but pretty strong. Bullpen is solid as well. I feel like it's not as flashy, and they were maybe hoping for a big move. They were in a lot on Bo Bichette before he ends up going to the Mets. This is still a solid lineup and a solid baseball team. And I think people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit because it's just they've run into a bit of a wall in the postseason, and that wall, of course, wearing Dodger blue. But at the top of the division this year, I'm going all in on the Atlanta Braves. I think last year was a season from hell. They had just injury issues all over the place. You look at this lineup 1 through 9, it is an incredibly talented ball club. And then with the additions they made in the starting rotation, with the additions they made out in the bullpen as well, I think you have to be really confident in what this team is. Obviously, there are going to be some injury issues again, but I don't think it's going to be to every star player this team has. So I think they're going to be taking a huge step forward just because everyone's there. And then you give one of the more aggressive GMs in the league an opportunity to get better and make his team a contender at the deadline. And we know Anthopoulos is going to jump on that 1,000 times out of 10. So I like the Braves a lot this season. I'm going over 87 and a half. Let's now go to the National League Central. And when I said the bad teams are going to be really bad, I had the St. Louis Cardinals in mind. And that's not something we have said about the Cardinals for a lot of my lifetime. But it's just kind of chipped away at it. And I think they understand now where they are, and more specifically, probably where they aren't. It is a transition time out in St. Louis. It's a pretty solid division otherwise. And I think they're going to have some real troubles this year. And anything that's good on this team, I think it's sold off before we get to August. So a long year out in St. Louis. Up next, the Milwaukee Brewers. I have them going under at 84 and a half. I think sending Peralta out the door, yes, Mizorowski is exciting, but this lineup just does not have enough, in my opinion. And they've been able to develop pitching really effectively there. But it is frustrating that you have a team that is constantly competing for division titles and constantly in the playoff picture and then constantly selling pieces off. And I think those are the teams that get me more frustrated than the Dodgers spending $300 million or anything like that. So I think because the rest of the division is kind of pushing forward a little bit, I think the Milwaukee Brewers do take a touch of a step back here this season at under 84 and a half. Next, I have the Cincinnati Reds. I have them going over 80 and a half. The Hunter Green injury sucks, but I said before, I think Ellie De La Cruz has the big breakout season we've all been waiting for from him. And they have shown, at least headlines-wise, in the offseason, they were trying to be competitive and trying to make a difference. And I think this team, still with a good pitching rotation, still with a solid lineup, I think they're going to be able to do enough to stay competitive and stay close enough that they're going to make some moves adding at the deadline and try to get them over the finish line. And so I think with all of that, I think this is at least a 500 ball club. So I think Cincinnati goes over 80 and a half. Next up is the Pittsburgh Pirates, second in the Central. I have them over, obviously, 78 and a half. You have the best pitcher in baseball in Paul Skeens. They made a really smart move with Brandon Lau, bringing him in to play second base. So this lineup, I think, can actually be a little bit threatening. And not like Baltimore Orioles, Bronx Bombers, anything like that, but it's just a solid lineup, especially at the top of it. I think you have a solid, again, pitching staff. It's time for this team to take a step forward, and I think this year they take at least a baby step toward being competitive for the postseason. But atop the division, I have the Chicago Cubs. We talked about them in underrated teams earlier this week. Bringing in Bregman, I think, just kind of rounds out that clubhouse really effectively. It's going to be still a strong team in terms of the batting order and the pitching rotation. Adding Cabrera to what was already a good staff makes this a very dangerous ball club. So I like the Cubs a lot. I think people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit. Losing Tucker, yes, headlines-wise, not great, but I think Bregman can get this team back to, he can at least replace that production anyway, and make this maybe even a better lineup than what we saw from them last season. And we know that they're going to be aggressive at the trade deadline if things are going their way. So I like the Cubs to win this division. Let's go to the NL West. But before we do that, if you're enjoying this from Couch Potato Diary, and you're watching on YouTube, check out the podcast. Just search Couch Potato Diary on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. let's go now to the National League West. And at the bottom, of course, the Colorado Rockies. It's not a good baseball team. They have some young kids coming up. That's neat. They're bad and are going to go under 55.5. And that's a low total, but I still think it's going to go under there this season. Arizona Diamondbacks at 79.5. I love the addition of Nolan Arenado. I think this is just a solid team. I know I talked about Perdomo as an overrated player in MLB, but he's still solid. Marte was on the trading block for a while, but they didn't. And so he is a really good player. Corbin Carroll obviously can be one of the better players in baseball when he's rolling. You add Arenado to that. I still think this pitching staff, I'm holding on to a little bit of what this staff was a couple of seasons ago when they made that run to the World Series. I don't think they're that good, but I don't think they're as bad as we've seen the last couple of seasons. So I think the Diamondbacks, a slight over, but that's just because they get to play Colorado a whole lot this season. San Francisco, I have them over 80.5. We talked about them as an underrated ball club. No, they did not get the big splash that everyone wanted them to get always. Another offseason where that didn't happen, but they made their big splash last year. You get Devers in there. It's a full season with him. It's a full spring training of him playing first base and him being comfortable in the Giants organization. Adding Arise, I know that he's a very polarizing player, but some good contact to that team. Bader is and at least an improvement over some things in the outfield. The starting staff is just solid. Like, it's a solid team. It's a team that's above 500, I think. So I'm going Giants over 80.5. San Diego Padres, their total's at 83.5. I am also going over on that. Again, like, Tatis had a great WBC. So did Manny Machado. This is a team that is always aggressive when it comes to the trade deadline. And having Mason Miller at the back part of that bullpen for the entirety of the season, I think really does help them out as well. And if they're even close to a playoff spot, that they're going to be aggressive in making those moves. So I said it when we talked about over or underrated teams in MLB this season. This one's not going to miss by a little. The Padres are either going to be flirting with 100 wins or with 60. Because if it goes bad, I think there could be a major teardown out in San Diego. I don't see that part happening, obviously. But there was a touch of Tatis trade speculation in the offseason. I wonder if that gets a little bit louder if things go bad and they try to recoup some things from Miller with him and a few other moves that they could make. I don't see that happening, but I think either way, this team is going to aggressively not be an 83.5 win team. And it's just a matter of which side is it on. But then, of course, the toast of the town, the Los Angeles Dodgers, over 102.5 wins. I can say all I want about Kyle Tucker and his nature and everything like that. It's still an upgrade to this team, and I think Yamamoto takes another step forward. You have Shohei, who's going to be pitching all season long. They have incredible major league depth in the starting rotation, and their one weakness from last season was the bullpen, and they went out and got one of the best closers in baseball in Edwin Diaz. So, there is obviously a path where this goes poorly, right? Where Betts, Freeman finally play to their age and maybe fall off a little bit. Kyle Tucker isn't the guy that everyone thought he would be, and all the injuries that have befelled this pitching staff continue to happen, and Diaz falls off a cliff. That's a lot of ifs that could happen there. I think they're pretty insulated from all of them, and they're the Dodgers, so if any of that happens, they'll just go trade for Fernando Tatis or something like that, and just be fine again. So it's over. 102.5. They're the best team in baseball, without a doubt. So that's how I think it all shakes down in the National League. What do you guys think? Like I said in the American League one, I can't imagine that I just nailed this from the tippy top of the NL East all the way to the bottom of the NL West. So let me know in the comments where you disagree and who you guys have going to the World Series out of the National League. And as always, you can follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein on Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky. If you have any issues with anything we talked about here and you're listening in podcast form, or you just want to go direct to the source from watching on YouTube here, hit me up on social media and we can talk about everything there. Time now for the predictions for how the playoffs are going to go in Major League Baseball. I've broken down every team in every division. Now let's see where they slot in the postseason. Let's break it all down. All right, here is how I think the playoffs will go in the 2026, Major League Baseball season. We've been doing previews all week. You'd think I'd have that by now. In the American League, I have the division winners being the Toronto Blue Jays, the Seattle Mariners, and the Kansas City Royals. I think the Mariners finish as the 1 seed with Toronto as the 2, which means Kansas City goes into the wild card bracket. They would take on the 3rd wild card team in the American League, the Boston Red Sox, in the first round of the postseason, while I would have the Yankees and the Rangers facing each other in the wild card round. Coming out of that, I do have Boston beating Kansas City in the wild card. Great showing, Kansas City, but this is the lot in life for the Central Division, losing there. Although I guess they did make the DS last season before the Tigers lost to the Mariners. Anyway, coming out of the Yankee-Texas one, I do have the Yankees winning that again, beating the Rangers. So the playoff for the American League Division Series would be the Mariners taking on the Boston Red Sox, and I have the Blue Jays facing the Yankees. Again, home field advantage helps out both of those teams. Mariners advance. That one I gave quite a bit of thought to, but I do think Mariners advance, and I have the Blue Jays again beating the New York Yankees in the American League Division Series, setting up a rematch for the ALCS, and it would be Seattle taking on Toronto. This time the Mariners have home field advantage, but there's a bias here. So I do have the Blue Jays winning and going to back-to-back World Series. Who will they be facing? Let's look at the National League. Division winners, I have the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Cubs. I think the Dodgers and Atlanta finish 1-2, so they get the bye into the NLDS. In the wildcard round, it will be the Cubs and the Padres, and the Phillies taking on the Mets. I wanted to put the Pirates in there. I just couldn't put them ahead of San Diego. So coming out of that, I do have the Phillies beating the Mets in the wildcard round, which would send New York into just a spiral, I think. And then I do have the Cubs beating the Padres in the wild card round. So we go to the NLDS, and again, we're going chalk. Both division winners, I think, advancing. I have the Dodgers once again beating the Philadelphia Phillies, and I have the Braves getting past the Chicago Cubs, which sets up the National League Championship Series, Atlanta taking on the LA Dodgers. And I said it before, I'm all in on this Atlanta team and them being able to stay healthy, all the talent they have. So I have the Braves advancing to the World Series, where they will, much like in 1992, fall to the Toronto Blue Jays. So yes, wild homer pick here. I'm not pretending that I'm not. But I do think that the Blue Jays, again, with that lineup just being solid 1 through 9, with them having the capabilities anyway of having one of the best rotations in baseball, and a bullpen that I do think is improved and a little bit more reliable, plus an ownership group that is absolutely willing to spend a ton of money on this ball club to get another $100 million run through the playoffs again, considering that they also own the television rights for the playoffs here in Canada, helps a little bit. So I think this team will be aggressive around the trade deadline and try to make those moves to solidify things. But I think even as it all sits right now, these two teams could face off in the World Series, and I think it would be the Blue Jays getting the job done. So I'm going to assume, again, not everyone watching this video is like, yep, Blue Jays, lock it in, 100%. Let me know where you guys are thinking I went wrong here in the comments, and we can have that discussion down there. And while you're there, hit that share button, whether you want to brag because you're a Jays fan. It's like, see, this guy wearing a Blue Jays hat and an Okotoks, Alberta hoodie that you can't really see. This guy knows his ball, so let's... Nah. Or if you just want to rage bait a Dodgers fan, hit that share button, and we can keep the conversation going with all of them.